welcome back to Coffee with CISOs. Today I'm excited to be joined by Jake Bernardis, the CISO of Anecdotes. Jake's background spans consulting. He was a head of IT, head of InfoSec, has a number of advisor roles, podcast host previously on a ton of podcasts, and now serving as CISO, giving him a really unique perspective on how the role of the modern security leader continues to evolve. So I'm really excited for our conversation today, Jake. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
For our first question, Jake, I usually try to dig into, folks' kind of personal lives before jumping into a security role. So what was young Jake like growing up? Maybe you could start with where you grew up and how you were as a young little rascal.
Yeah, I grew up in the middle of the country in England. I'm a part of the country which is familiar for two reasons. One is it's the Shire from Lord of the Rings, and second is it's where Peaky Blinders is supposedly from, the Midlands of the UK. Although I didn't kill anyone with razor blades and didn't grow up on a canal boat. But yeah, I think I was a fairly normal kid, right? Things were different when I was a kid. I'm into my 40s and life was a bit different. You had Mega Drives and SNESes that had no ability to save. You spent your life at the park until it got dark and no one worried about your location. There was no mobile phone. Social media wasn't even a conceived concept. I think we lived different lives to what kids live today. I don't know if that's necessarily better or worse. Depends on which day you ask me. But I think I also always had a natural inclination to understand how things work. I think I ended up in this profession because I liked to break things, rebuild things, reimagine things. I think that every hacker, security person deep down inside has that kind of desire to bend the rules. I certainly think that was part of me as a young person.
Absolutely. And were you exposed to tech at a young age, or could you kind of walk me through like how you jumped into tech and then eventually cyber?
Yeah, I grew up with computers, so we weren't very wealthy as kids, but we had old school tech like Ataris and ZX Spectrums. We had cassettes that you turned over in the middle of games, where you could actually code and write things that were incredibly badly written and looked terrible. But and then I remember getting my first Amstrad where it was half Mega Drive, half Windows 3.1, and trying to spend my youth trying to either break games with cheat codes or find ways to illegally download games or illegally come by games. So I think I pretty much grew up alongside tech. My dad was always really into computers as well, so I think that's it was part of my life, right? Growing up with building PCs rather than buying PCs, and what happened if I did this and what happened if I did that. Yeah, so definitely grew up with tech. And then I guess security is a weird one. I don't think anyone really grows up in security. I think you grow up in technology and then find that it aligns with your natural personality traits. I said most hackers, when it comes deep down, have probably some form of ADHD. They like to do multiple things at once and bounce all over the place. They like to break things. They like to push boundaries. They like to think outside the box. I think they're probably the skill sets that if you combine those with a kind of childhood or growing up in technology that end you up in security eventually, whatever meandering path you take. I feel like we all end up there because of tech background and those specific set of attributes or personality traits.
Yeah, I think you laid out the equation exactly right, where it's being a very curious kid and then getting exposure to tech and then wanting to fully understand the systems end to end, how to break it, how to fix it, how to piece it back together. So almost every security practitioner I meet with has the same kind of unruly, curious background. So I love that. That was your story as well. Looking at your background, your first technical role on your LinkedIn was a product specialist role at IBM. Could you walk me through how young Jake, getting this exposure to tech, tinkering with things, landed that role and what that journey was like?
Yeah, I think this is always a bit of a personal journey. I talk about this quite a lot on my LinkedIn stories. I think that we struggle sometimes in life, particularly in the UK and probably globally, where we try and force people into career paths. I grew up loving tech, but then was always told, right, go into finance, go into languages, go into applicable jobs that have structured career paths. I ended up at university studying Chinese and German and living in China for a couple of years. I became fluent in Mandarin, which is terrible these days because it's a language if you don't maintain, you lose. But off the back of that, unfortunately, I came out of my degree at the time when China very much went from being very Western focused to closing its borders and trying to turn inwardly and saying China is for China. So a lot of the opportunities that existed when I was at university suddenly vanished. And so I kind of fell back to what I knew, which was tech. I went to an IBM kind of, I suppose, graduate scheme or postgraduate scheme and got picked up on mainframes of all things, which was bizarre. I mean, Z is the mainframe. What I was involved in was actually security for Linux. So there was a weird loophole for a while where you could sell Linux on IFL cores on a mainframe. Effectively, that meant Oracle used to charge per processor. We found a way at IBM to basically put 20 instances or 20 processors on one processor. So we basically took out like a lot of our competitors' hardware sales using the Oracle database. And then my job was to work on how you actually talked about securing that, because it wasn't traditional like x86 architecture, it was something completely different. So, and that's how I grew up back in security, I guess. I had a role where I was a product specialist and focused on security, and suddenly thought, yeah, this is pretty fun. And then we'll carry down the career journey. I then went from there into a non-technical role. Initially I went to KPMG and worked in tech deals. So I had a pretty sharp background in finance and ended up working in like corporate finance for tech deals. And then the Northern KPMG office opened or expanded its penetration testing and security teams, and basically invited internally, did anyone want to apply and kind of like move? And at the time I was like, well, I don't really see my life in finance. I'm not built for this world. I'll take a hack the box. I hacked the box and I've never gone back since. Went into security, became a pen tester, pretty sucky at infra testing and web app testing. I mean, adequate, but pretty good at physical pen testing and social engineering. At least I was back in the day. And that's kind of where I went. And with that, I've never looked back. I've kind of gone from that point where I said, I quite fancy trying this hack the box off this random email broadcast. And yeah, here I am.
I love it. You kind of caught the bug, and then the rest is history, especially starting out in consulting roles. A lot of CISOs that start out in those consulting roles say it really gave them the end-to-end experience and business acumen that they need now in their current CISO roles. So I think it's a great kind of Kickstarter onto that path.
Yeah, it's not just that. Like when I was at KPMG, we all got, even when we were in the pen testing teams, we got offered the chance to do an ATA, which is an accounting qualification, similar to where I think a CPA in the US. Like seriously deep financial accounting. Really hard, 15 exams that were harder than any tech exam or higher exam I've ever done. And I've done like the OSC and stuff. So yeah, I think that's one thing. If I look back and go, you see some people who talk about having an MBA and stuff, that's the one that gave me the ability now. And we talk about what leadership, also what modern security leaders are. Like, I rely a lot on the fact I understand how business mechanics work. Like I understand financials. Like I've spent a lot of time in startups. I know how equity works. I know how VCs work. I know how funding rounds work. I know how we have to deliver. I understand how to look at a balance sheet and a P&L. Like these things are invaluable right now to being a leader. Too many CISOs are super technical. And we talk about how do you talk to the board, but the problem is, and I've said this a lot from a lot of stages, I can't just teach you how to talk to the board, because you need a financial education. You need a strategy education. You can't just go and learn that tomorrow. These are the same things that you can't go and get an accountant and teach them to pen test in a day. You can't get a CISO and teach them to speak financial in a day. You can give them enough to sound like they're competent, but nowhere near enough to really have gravitas and be able to carry a room.
That's a really great point. And what advice would you say for maybe folks looking to get into that CISO role who may not have that current exposure to financial literacy? What would be a good starter for them to jump into that?
I think it depends on where you want to go and what you want to do. I've carved a path very much in being in tech companies, very much being in startup companies, and very much being vendor side. I love being involved in security companies. It's my passion. I think if you're in our world, you've got to be able to do everything. If you're going to be a CISO in a tech vendor, security vendor, you've got to understand marketing, sales, tech, R&D, finance. You've got to understand the whole lot. So I think it depends where you are. If you're a deputy CISO looking to go into a large corporate or a public company or whatever it might be, right, then I think there's two different core differentiations right now. One is having that strategy and financial skill set and education, which I think you can get through an MBA if you want to spend the money, or I think you can develop it yourself if you go and spend enough time enrolling in courses that are available for a lot less dollars than an MBA is, right? So I think you can develop this skill set without having the letters after your name. I don't think our industry cares as much about the MBA as many industries do. The second right now is the completely opposite path, where I think we're looking at CISOs going way more technical than they used to be. I come from a technical background, but a lot of CISOs I meet come from pure consulting, right? They come from a risk background, an audit background, which is fine. I have no problem with that. But I think now in this right moment in time, the future CISO needs to be technical. They need to be able to work with agents. They need to be able to build stuff. They don't necessarily need to be able to go to code and like go into assembler. I mean, who cares about assembler, right? But they do need to be able to understand the core principles of, if this is what people want in the market, how do you build that from an outcome going backwards? And what does good look like? And what am I going to have to think about from a development stance, from a security stance? So I think right now, if you can have both, great. But if not, choose one. Either get really good at financial and strategic acumen, or get really good at being able to speak technical to a board level. Like, how do you explain these things to non-technical people?
That's something that we've talked about internally. Do you think that the CISO role will ever expire? Do you think now in the age of AI we'll continue to need CISOs? You've spoken on this, so I know your stance, but would love to hear you speak on it for the Lockstep listeners.
Look, I've been really passionate about this for various places. I think the CISO role becomes more important. I think the CIO is going to die. I don't see the point in the CIO anymore. I don't know why a CISO reports to a CIO, right? When there was infrastructure and data centers and complex homegrown or home self-deployed applications, great. You're now managing cloud spend and applications. I can do that. I don't need a CIO, but he can't manage security. I can do his job. He can't do mine. Or she can't do mine, right? So I think that there's very much that one. I think the second is there's this idea that AI and agents are going to replace everything. It doesn't. Right, let's be honest. Like, I don't know that when anyone says that, I query their technical level. I've built agentic stuff. It's cool. It does a lot of stuff. It makes me more efficient. It makes me hyper efficient. But it's not going to replace me tomorrow. Like, and actually, in the age of AI, we're having more subjective decisions. In the end, like AI is a tool that augments decision making. It still requires people to make decisions. Like you look at Terra as an example, automated pen testing, right? That's Copilot for pen testers. It's augmenting pen testers. We're not replacing them tomorrow. And I think at the same time, the attacks are now becoming more smart and prolific, right? You might have read the last few days, there's a massive new version of Shai Hulud that's killing GitHub instances all over the place. That now takes a CISO who understands what the hell that's doing and understands GitHub. Like going back to my point, your ex-consulting golf course by 3, wearing like a Ralph Lauren shirt and understanding banking in New York, that guy doesn't know what the hell Shai Hulud's doing in GitHub. So I think there's different versions of different CISOs right now, but I think we're becoming more important, not less. I think anyone who thinks otherwise does not understand what we do and is going to have a significant risk exposure when they get rid of their CISO.
And do you think that's what the role of the CISO is going to be in the future? Kind of sharing that context with the board and having to share, this is why I play a key critical role in this business because of X, Y, and Z.
If we have to justify our role at the board level, we're not very good at our jobs. Constantly people say like, why are CISOs the bastard child? Why does no one care about them? And they use all these excuses saying that the profession's only 25 years, 35, 25, 30 years or whatever, right? The reality is it's because most CISOs aren't competent executives. And I wasn't. I've grown that skill set probably in the last 3 years. The reality is that most of us come from technical backgrounds. We've very quickly gone from being a manager to a director to a head of to a VP to a CISO. And suddenly we're sitting at the big boys or big girls table and we don't even know what we're doing. What are we contributing? We're not there just to answer the questions about security. The whole point is an executive. You're there to drive the business forward. If that business is selling sunglasses, then your job is to help sell more sunglasses. Your job is not to stop the data getting breached. Yes, it's part of it, but you're really there to help sell more sunglasses. So I think the reality is if a CISO is having to justify their role to an executive team, it's because they're not very good as executives. First and foremost, I'm an executive. I'm a member of a C-suite table. My job is to drive the business forward. If I'm not doing that, then they have every right to query me. And I then have to prove my worth, and at that point I've already lost.
That's such a solid point of if you're already in that zone of being questioned, then maybe that role itself might not be a good fit because maybe you moved up through the ranks through that technical role and then you don't have that business acumen or coaching in order to be in that seat. I was actually talking to Sean on the last episode and we were talking about the different tracks to CISO, and he had really great advice on you have to carve out time. You have to find mentors, you have to read books. You know, if that's something that's lacking, there are ways to get there. But to your point, you also have to put the onus on yourself to set aside time in order to be in that seat.
I think there's also the point of you don't have to be a CISO. I have security engineers that I pay as much as my own salary. I have security guys in AI, GRC engineers in the modern world who get paid as much, if not more, than some CISOs. You don't need to be a CISO. We are one of the few professions where being the C or the VP is not the be-all and end-all. In virtually every other strata of a business, the most salary goes to those people. The truth is that's not true in security. There's SREs, there's specific security engineers, there's specific GRC engineers who are making as much as CISOs are. If that's what you love and that's what you're good at, don't think you have to be a CISO. Some people don't want to be hands-off. I'm really hands-off now, and I don't like it. I think that's the thing you have to accept is if this is a path for you, you have to want it. You have to understand what it is. But to your other point, mentors, phenomenal. I've talked about this a few times recently. I actually had Rinky on my podcast, ironically, a couple of weeks ago, but the episode's coming out in a couple of months. And she talks about mentors. And so that's what our conversation was. And I think that's massive. I've had people in my life like Carl Mattson, now Squared Circle, Asaf Kieran, CISO at Qualtrics, Adam Arellano at Harness. I've had multiple people who have just been there with no expectation of return to give time to help foster and improve and kind of nurture me. And I'm trying to do the same now. Like I said, anyone who's listening, I'm trying to take more mentorees on, particularly women who want to grow up in the cyber world. That's kind of one of my passions. And I think that is specifically important and really powerful in cyber. We are a community still. We are more of a community than probably any other part of a business is, and we want to help each other. Like if you want to grow, go find mentors. I don't know anyone who will say no. They might say I've not got that much time, but they won't say no. And I think that's the key thing, right? Find mentors who appeal to you and who can help you, but also always consider, is the be all and end all CISO, or is the be all and end all doing something that you love and getting paid the amount you're worth?
That's such a great point, because I think traditionally you think C-suite is the end all be all. But to your point, if the end all be all for you is money, or it's being a subject matter expert in a specific role, there are different ways to achieve that. And it doesn't always need to be the CISO role. So I guess for you, what do you like out of the CISO role that keeps you in it? Like, what are the parts of it that are exhilarating to you?
I think every CISO loves pressure. They love the fact you are always 24 hours away from a data breach, and they love those moments. They hate those moments when they tell you about them, but they secretly love those moments. I think at the same time, every CISO I know, like I said, has ADHD of some form. They want to be in more places multiple times. If you find CISOs like me in the vendor world, probably even more so. I love that I'm probably the only person who sits at our executive table who can help every single person in the room on the bonuses they get paid on. There is no way to be more valuable than being able to say, I can help the sales guy because I have a network that can create opportunities and revenue for you. I can help marketing because I have the voice and the understanding of what the market wants. I can help R&D because I know how the product should be delivered and what should be developed and what we want to buy. I can help finance. I understand financial maths and mechanics. I can understand support because I know what our customers' actually problems are. I can understand services because I know what services I would buy. I can go around the room and say, here's all the people I could help and I know what you're paid on. Here's how I can help you get there. That is phenomenally rewarding. It gives you incredible job security, but it's also phenomenally rewarding, right? In the end, I think that the love of making things happen, like that's the thing that I think gets most CISO out of bed. It's whether that is changing a product, whether that's securing, whether that's responding to a breach, whether that is doing your own pen testing, whatever that might look like. Every CISO gets excited for like making things happen.
And your percent of impact of being a CISO at a security specific company, I'm sure maybe you touched on this with Rinky too, but it's the same for her, of knowing that you have impact across so many verticals of the business is really fulfilling. And to your point, it's a community, you play as a team, and you are able to directly impact so many business lines being CISO at a security specific company, and you're part of the build, I'm sure too as well.
Yeah, it takes a very specific persona because it's a hard role to do. You have to be able to wear multiple hats at one time and be able to do a lot of things very well. So I think vendor CISOs who are very good at their job are few and far between. But yeah, if you can do it, it's probably one of the most fun jobs in the security world.
For sure. And I definitely wanted to touch back on your point about mentorship, because I think that definitely needs to be talked about more in industry. And this sounds like a silly, basic question, but for folks who are struggling to even find mentors for themselves, what would you say is the best course of action for someone who maybe doesn't have a mentor? Where do they start?
I think there's 3 stages to that process, right? I think first is work out where you want to get to. Like, what do you want? Are you an analyst who wants to get to be a manager? Are you a manager who wants to get to be a director? Are you a director who wants to be a CISO? Are you in security engineering? Are you in GRC? Are you in pen testing? What are you, right? And where are you going? I think the second is to work out, once I know where I want to get to, what persona or what guidance or what help do I need? And the next, and the really hard bit where most people stop, most people do those first 2 steps. And the hard bit is then, how do I go and get that help? Now, I think there's a thing about the concept of virality, right? The more network points you have, the easier it is to connect a network. If you look at social channels, right? If you look at LinkedIn, if you look at my network, I've got a few people. Rinky being one. I've got Ayub Fandi, who's the GRC engineer, Mike Prevet, who runs a newsletter about security investment and businesses, Carl Matson, Asaf Kier, and a few people in my network, Adam Arellano, who I know are connected to insane amounts of people. I'm probably becoming one of those people too, slowly but surely, right? So I think reach out to those kind of people and say, either could you help me? And the answer might be yes. Hopefully the answer is yes. If the answer is no, then it's like, who else could help me? And the chances are I might go, I'd love to mentor you. Or I might go, I'd like to, but I don't know what I can give you right now. You're not in the right role, the right place. But here's like 5 people who probably could, and I'll start the conversations to introduce you to kind of broker that network. The reality is you've got to have the courage first to ask. It's the same, and I think the problem is, I feel like this is going to be a soundbite, but the problem is that society is now broken. So when I was young, you had to actually approach people in bars, in cinemas, in bowling alleys, wherever it was, right? You had to be able to talk to people. And there was this core skill set to how do you approach someone with a requirement that you have, I'd like to take you on a date, whatever, and get from A to B. We don't have that anymore because you just swipe until it clicks. And you know you've both swiped on the same thing. So before you even message that person, DM them, you know they liked you or else you wouldn't be able to message them. So you've almost brokered that first difficult conversation point already. But LinkedIn doesn't do that. You have to go and speak to someone. So we've got to teach people that even in our modern remote world, which is wonderful that we all have different, more balanced lives, like go up and ask people. I will, anyone who speaks to me at a conference or event, I'll say this here because I know this is true. Anyone who comes to speak to me, I will stop and speak to you. I will never say I don't have time, right? And I might not be able to help you, I might not be able to answer your question, I might be no use to you whatsoever, but I might be able to point you in the direction of a person who is. And I think that's true for every CISO I know. So I think that's my core ask, is if you want help, just learn to ask. Because people won't say no. The problem lies in that point number 3. Like, people just don't know how to ask.
That is such a core point, because we actually brought on some summer interns here at Lockstep, and one of the things we tell them is go out there, ask questions, be proactive. We want you to feel like you're owning this internship, and so tap into the community, tap into our networks. Like, we want you to feel like you're able to drive without us having to ask for things. I think that art is such a forgotten art, or something that we actually need to actively practice as humans, especially in industry. With all of these in-person events now, you have to go out of your way to start these conversations and to build these relationships. And that's why for us, community is so important, because it's something that doesn't just happen. It happens because you're putting in the time, the effort, the energy, the follow-ups. So I love that you brought up that point, because I think in a world of convenience, especially now with AI, people forget that it does take work building these relationships. So your point about mentoring and putting yourself out there, and if it's a no from them, it's maybe a yes from 5 other people they refer.
But also, people appreciate real outreach, right? Now, like, I'm really conscious that if you follow my LinkedIn feed, my videos and everything I do is written first time and I hit post. I don't review anything. Nothing comes from ChatGPT. I'm conscious that I want it to be me, because everything out there right now isn't you. It's AI. And most of the messages I get in my DMs on LinkedIn, and I get 50 to 100 a day, are AI. I can spot the ones that aren't. And I'll give you 2 examples about asking, right? So Joe Sullivan, obviously super famous dude right now because of the whole Uber thing and everything happened since, right? I wanted to get Joe on my podcast. I wanted to ask him, not about him. I wanted to actually get his wife on the podcast, and that's what it's like to be at home when your husband is all of the news being talked about in such an awful way. Message Joe, he responded and said, fine, let's do it, right? You don't message, you don't know. Second one, I read a book, one of my favorite books that I think everyone should read. It's called Confessions of a Unicorn Founder. It's by Ran Cohen, who is based in Tel Aviv. He's worth $100 million or more. He's had 2 massive exits, and he wrote this fascinating book about what the Tel Aviv ecosystem is like and what doing a startup is like. Again, I messaged Ran on LinkedIn just to say I really liked your book. Like, I've just read it. It's one of the best books I've ever read. I've worked in Tel Aviv for a long time. I found this fascinating. I'd love to have a chat sometime. Instant response, I'm actually recording a podcast with him tomorrow. Right, so I think the reality is that people actually want to be, like, people want relationships. And I think when we go back to the point of what makes a good CISO, what makes a good leader, it's still relationships. Like, you can be as technically competent as you want and as great in any scenario as you want, as polished as you want, but real, authentic relationship building is still a skill which is fundamentally lacking across the globe. And I think just building, if there's one thing I tell anyone to build who wants to progress up the chain, work on that. Work on just being you and being able to build relationships with other people by being yourself.
I completely agree, and I'm glad that you brought up your post on LinkedIn, because that's something that jumped out to me as I was prepping for our conversation. You do a really good job of, number 1, consistently posting, and number 2, consistently posting in your voice, and also sharing a little bit more about your personal life, which makes you relatable. For me, I feel like I know you without having to talk hours on end just because of your posts, and I see them weekly. So my question for you is, in a world that's increasingly shaped by AI, you can see there's AI in every post. What advice would you give to your kids, who I know you post about, as they grow up navigating it? So what's your kind of parenting style with it?
I think there's a few parts to this, right? Let's start with the first one. Because there will be people ask, how do you build a persona? And I think the first point is consistency. You pointed out you have to be consistent in things and do it the same way, in the same style. And if you're going to choose to write by AI, you have to be consistent in AI. If you're going to choose to write yourself, you have to be consistent yourself. I think there's that one. I think allowing vulnerability and authenticity, I think it's really important to be who you are. And it takes time. For like months, I'd get like 1 or 2 likes on posts. And then it was really this year when I went to RSA and random people were stopping me in the street saying, oh, I've read your posts, or like, how are you feeling? Because I'd said that I had a chest infection before I went to San Francisco, and I had random people asking me how it was. And that was really weird, but at the same time, kind of like refreshing. So I think that's the point about how we avoid AI to build personas. Now, to my kids, I may be weird. I'm an anti-technology technologist. So I want to take my kids back to real life. Like today, I had some time, so I actually built a scavenger hunt around our local village. I went and like hid clues in like trees and stuff, and had them go from clue to clue around the village, like just doing that. My kids are heavily screen time limited, no screens in the morning, they have a limit on the Xbox, on TV, no social media, no YouTube, iPads only when we're traveling. There's pretty strict rules on them. And I think that's really important, because I think actually what we're doing when we're giving kids too much technology, and particularly too much AI, when we're letting them just ask ChatGPT questions, it is two things. One is we're being lazy parents, because we could answer the question ourselves. And the second is we're building a non-resilient generation. So I think that on cyber and business, the future problems we have are resilient. In the technical sense, I could go super deep on why I think right now mythos, if it taught one lesson, is resilience matters more than defense. But it's the same in people. Like, I want my kids to be able to think for themselves. If the answer isn't immediately there, it's okay not to know. It's okay to never find the answer. Like, make it up for yourself. And at the same time, like, I want people to believe. There's something magical about an 8-year-old who believes in unicorns. And at some point they stop believing in unicorns because they start thinking about the possible, rather than the art of the possible, like the probable is the art of the possible. So I think that you've got to arm kids with technical competencies. I've taught mine how to sit with things like Rep and Lovable and build games and what a Zap looks like, and like how to play with ChatGPT and how to use it for good purposes and why it's beneficial for lots of things. You've got to educate your kids because they will have this stuff in the future, but at the same time you can't just force it down their throats like you're trying to make foie gras. You have to allow kids still to be that way, because otherwise I think that when the first time challenges come, and they will come, they don't have resilience because they've just been given an instantaneous answer. The same as like when we were kids, again, you watch TV, there was adverts. Adverts sucked. If you missed the start of a series or an episode, you missed the start of a series and episode. If you missed one because you were on vacation or holiday, you missed one. You never found that episode, never came back. It was gone. Right? Now we have this instantaneous gratification for music, for podcasts, for TV, for food, for answers through AI, through ChatGPT. That's not the way the world works. And it's the same, when you talk about leadership, I'm on a pedestal, sorry. You talk about leadership, like that's the problem. Up until you get to that point, you can serve your answers. You can go to Claude and to OpenAI and say, I need help with this. Once you get to the top, when someone says, what are you going to do now? That's a subjective, risk-based decision that requires executive leadership. That requires someone who's resilient and able to think. That requires someone who's not relying on AI. If we teach our kids just to rely on AI, then we are pretty doomed, because we'll never have proper leaders.
I haven't heard anyone bring up resilience when it comes to this answer, and I think that's so important, especially in the world of convenience and, like you said, just direct access to anything we want at any point. Like, everything is completely open at our fingertips, and so kind of training that discipline and resilience early on for kids is really critical. I also wanted to circle back to your point before about posting on LinkedIn. I think you have that brand that jumps out to me. Like, you have set aside time to share more about yourself, and you're kind of giving people exposure to who you are before you even send that initial reach out. So I think your profile is a great example of how to even start your own personal brand as a baseline for folks to develop relationships on top of it.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. I think vulnerability is the key. I've talked openly about the things that I've been successful at and put them out there, almost like, if you want to know what I'm good at, this is what I'm good at. But equally, I've said these are the things that I failed at. And why I failed. And I think that builds a trusting relationship when people reach out to you. I've never applied for a job at this point. When people reach out to you to ask, like, they know me. They know what I'm good at. They know what I'm crap at. They know that I'll say it in a public sphere if I fail, so they're pretty confident I'm not going to lie to them in front of their face. I think that's important, especially in today's world when everything is sugar-coated and manicured and post-edited.
Exactly. And I do want to jump back into your experience, because I know at the top we were talking about how you've spanned consulting, you were head of IT at one point, head of InfoSec, you do a ton of advisory roles. How has seeing the industry from so many different angles helped shape the way you lead today?
I think it's data points, right? It's reference points. It's like I said before, good leaders can make decisions in tough times. And to do that, you need multiple data points and their perspectives. How does this look from a company in this type? How does this look from that role in that type? Like, I can put myself in the mind of an attacker and know what I would do if I was attacking us. I can put my mind in the IT world and say, this is the kind of compromisable issues, or this is what worries I have about like DR or BC, or like continuous running of our applications. I could go into consulting. I've seen multiple business types solve the same problem in multiple different ways in different geographies. I've been fortunate, like I said, to live and work in the Middle East, the Far East, the US, all over Europe. Like, I've been in a lot of places and I've seen things done in a lot of different ways. And I think that makes you more holistic, and then you can draw on a deeper and richer pool of experience when it comes to deciding what you want to do and how you want to be. Like I said, I've become kind of a patchwork or a pick and mix of all the things that I've seen and learned, and that's kind of what I suppose I'm formulating as my approach. It is very much taken from multiple different places, not from one single linear experience.
And let's just say now, if we were to pluck you out of Anecdotes and throw you into another company and you were building a security program from scratch in 2026, how would AI change your approach?
I think there's two ways to look at that. So I think the first and unavoidable is AI in security. There are now tools that can do more, right? There is better automation in pen testing. There is better automation in disaster recovery. There is better automation in GRC. There are lots of areas where there's better levels and capabilities. So I think you can get a team to do more. I think it would change who you hire. I think you would hire less junior people and more orchestration level. And those people are both able to deal with multiple tools and applications, but they're also builders. They're people who can get in the code and actually build workflows and learn how to sit in Codex, for example, with an OpenAI and actually make things happen when that application doesn't exist that they want to do, right? So they understand outcomes and delivery vehicles. I think at the same time, though, it's AI against security. Like if you look, again, I just referenced at the beginning, but the new version of Shai-Hulud has recently hit a bunch of companies across GitHub environments. And that's a very sophisticated attack that relies on AI as a vehicle for how to deliver it. I think that we're now going to have to be super sensitive and more intelligent around how we secure AI development environments, how we secure development environments full stop, how we secure the use of AI, how we secure the data in AI. I think that it's actually ironically in driving two directions. One is to adopt more AI. One is to probably reduce our level of AI or heavily secure against it, because it's a wild west, right? Now, any CISO who says, I know all the AI tools being used in my organization is a liar or an idiot. It's wild and rife, and there is no way right now to get a full grip on it, and there isn't good enough tooling there to do it. Especially the one thing, if we went on a technical line, the sheer volume now of credentials, both API keys and access creds that are flying around the world in various AI environments that become impossible to centrally manage and rotate if you have to. So I think that the whole thing is getting super complex. So to ensure, I think you leverage the AI available in security applications to do more, which changes who you hire to be more delivery focused and probably more hands-on technical. But at the same time, you have to be very sensitive to the complexity that AI is bringing to our environments, which I think is creating more frequent and more complex attacks. And it's way harder to secure than it was 5 years ago.
For sure. I feel like it's not even shadow IT anymore. Just the entire org is one big shadow. And it's the CISO's role to figure out how to put arms around as much of it as possible.
But that's also the problem, right? This has become such a confrontational point. It's like, who owns AI? I'll be like, I want it. But then like someone else will be like, I want it. That person wants over there because they can do everything way faster and crash through walls quicker. I want it because I want to make sure we've got like some logic and concepts around it. Like, I think that there is a fight around who wants it. And I think that in itself is challenging right now. Like you say, shadow AI, I look at it and go, if Mythos taught us one lesson, it's that every application, every company, every infrastructure is inevitably breakable. That means that right now, defending, sure, you've got to defend, but defense becomes less important and resilience becomes more. I said I'd come back to it when I said it earlier. It's like, it becomes more important now how quickly you can restore and how confident you are you can restore a fully functioning application with the right data and all the ephemeral components and make it work in like meeting your SLAs, rather than it stopping the attack. Because you aren't, if you're targeted, you aren't stopping the attacks anymore. Like, you're recovering from the attacks.
Well, thanks so much, Jake. I do have one fun question to wrap up here. So
Go ahead.
What's something people would be surprised to learn about you outside of cybersecurity?
It's a difficult one because I don't know if because I live my life in quite a public way. I don't know if there's much that people don't know about. People know that I love to run and ride. I do lots with my kids. I'm an obsessive traveler about vacations. I guess what I'm finding is the older you get as a girl dad, the softer you get. I think my wife always says that she's not seen me cry only once in like 15 years of marriage, which I'm not saying is a good statement. That's a problem that I've got. I'm broken, but like it's not a positive statement. But I've realized as I'm getting older that there's a softer side of me. I mean, we've done this weird thing recently where you can rent chicks in the UK. I don't know if this thing in the US, right? So this guy turned up with 7 chicks in an incubator and they hatch in our house, and then we have all these baby chickens running around, and then we give them back to the farm after like, I don't know, 3 weeks, whatever, right? And I found myself earlier just sitting there playing with these little cuddly chicks with my daughter. And I was like, if I would never have thought this would have been me. So I think that's the thing. I think that I've realized and people don't know about me is I am probably much softer than my harder exterior probably suggests at times.
I saw that post and I was cracking up because that's totally your engineering brain thinking, we're really paying them to do their job.
When I first saw it, I was like, I said to my wife, what on earth are we doing here?
It makes no sense. It's backwards. But then you saw, I mean, you got to play with them directly and you saw how happy your daughter was. So that softened you a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. And I suppose there's a lesson in that, right? Which is that in the best outcomes, everybody wins. They get money, they don't have to look after chickens. I've got a very happy daughter. It's probably emotionally good for me. Like everybody wins, and those are the best outcomes in any business or personal scenario.
Absolutely. And it's probably a good break from CISO work too, just getting to be hands-on with the kids and hang out with the animals too. And I know you mentioned travel, so maybe last question is, where's the next destination for you and the family?
Oh gosh, we only book vacations quite short in advance, like 6 weeks in advance. So and we take like 5 or 6 a year. So I don't know. We wanted to go back to Abu Dhabi, but war has made that an issue recently. We love Abu Dhabi. We've been a lot of times. We just recently came back from Lake Bled in Slovenia, which is incredible. One of the most breathtaking places on the planet. I think Madeira is what my wife has in mind next, which is called the Hawaii of Europe.
I went last year.
Is it worth it?
It's worth it.
Okay, fine. That's where I'm going next. I'll get off the phone and I'll let you know. I'm going to book a trip to Madeira in August when some holidays are. That's going to be the next one for me.
I will say it's definitely slower pace, so it does feel more of like a vacation than anything, but it's a gorgeous island and it is Hawaii of Europe. It's beautiful.
I'm all for slower. Like I say, one of my favorite vacations, we were looking to go on safari last year to the Masai Mara for the Great Migration, and we stayed in a camper in the middle of the Masai Mara, and one of my favorite things was no phone signal. Like it doesn't work. Like there is nothing anywhere near. So like you're forced to slow down. You physically can't respond. Nothing can happen. It's the same in Lake Bled, right, where we just went. Like I love disconnecting. Like my favorite type of holidays is like the watch comes off, the phone comes off, they get left in the hotel room. I tell my team, if you're going to desperately need me, you're going to have to call my wife. Here's her number, because I'm leaving the phone and things separately, and those are the best types of vacations.
I love it. You're going to be the first person I reach out to for my next vacation planning. I'll have to get advice from you and your wife on the next go. We're actually going to Japan next week.
Oh, you're killing me. Japan's on the list, but we've delayed Japan for a long time because we're not quite sure. Do we do summer Japan or spring Japan or winter? Because we're big skiers. So part of us wants to go in the full-blown. Apparently the snow is insane. But the other half of it is like cherry blossoms and trees and mountains. And it's why we've always delayed it.
I'll report back. I think June in Japan is going to be really humid. So maybe a winter play would be better. But I'll let you know how June is over there.
Yeah, that sounds sick.
Thank you so much for your time, Jake. It's been really fun chatting with you. Whenever you're in the Bay Area, definitely let us know. We'd love to host you in the Lockstep office here.
Yeah, absolutely my pleasure. I'm trying not to travel because I travel the last 11 weeks to and from the US every week. But I'm around at Black Hat. I'll see you at your Lockstep Black Hat, I'm sure.
Yes, for sure. I'll see you in August. Really
All right,
great seeing you. Take care.
Bye-bye.